When they finally called his name, it wasn't because they believed in him. It was because there was nobody else left who could answer the question. Jordan Hale looked at his teammates, sighed. "Fine, Marcus, it is time to prove your worth. Not, help us out, just fine." And Marcus Webb knew exactly what that meant. Hargrove Academy was a private high school connected to Hargrove State University. Every year, the university hosted one of the regional rounds of a national engineering challenge. Backed by the Whitmore Foundation, the winning school would receive a $5 million endowed scholarship fund, and every team member would receive a full 4-year scholarship. And the school that won would carry the name of the competition on a plaque in its main hall forever. It mattered. It mattered more than anything the school had done in years. Team captain Jordan Hale made that very clear when he stood up in the selection room and said, with total seriousness, that he was not here to carry dead weight. But you see, Marcus made the list because he was a diligent student. Marcus had posted the highest engineering aptitude score in school history, forcing the principal to add him. But at Hargrove Academy, this didn't count for much. Aside from Marcus's mother, the janitor, everyone saw Marcus as one thing, the janitor's son. Nothing more, nothing less. They never cared whether he could do it or not. "Why did the janitor's son make the list?" Jordan mumbled. Jordan was the kind of student who made teachers nervous in a good way. Perfect scores, national merit commendation. Already had 3 college offers at 17. He looked at Marcus Webb sitting at the end of the table and said nothing, but his expression said plenty. The other 2 members, Priya Anand and Carter Mills, didn't say anything either. Priya was polite about it, in the way that people are polite when they feel sorry for you, but don't want to get involved. Carter was less subtle. On the first day of practice, he leaned over to Jordan and said, just loud enough, "Tell me again why we couldn't just compete as 3. Marcus heard it. He wrote something in his notebook and kept working. He was always rushing off after practice, always the first to pack up, always apologizing quietly as he headed for the door. Jordan assumed he was just disengaged. Priya thought maybe he was embarrassed. Carter had already decided he was useless. And what none of them knew was that Marcus left every practice early to meet his mother outside the chemistry building, where she cleaned labs until 8 o'clock. He carried the heavier supply cart up the stairs for her, because the elevator on the east wing had been broken for 3 months and nobody had fixed it yet. While they debated strategy at Jordan's house over takeout and laptops, Marcus sat in an empty hallway outside a locked lab and worked through the same problems in pencil by the light of his phone. He noticed things in those sessions, quiet things, a flaw in their load distribution model, a redundancy in their stress calculations that would cost them points, a missed variable in the environmental simulation that none of them had caught. He wrote it all down. He tried to warn them. He wasn't sure they'd listen. And they proved him right. Nobody even considered what he had to say. "What does the janitor's son have to say?" Jordan asked. The day of the regional finals arrived cold and gray. The competition was held in the main auditorium of Hargrove State University. 3 tiers of seating filled with students, faculty, judges, and family members. 8 teams. 1 shot. The top team would advance to the national finals, where the endowment would be awarded. Everything was going wrong before the first round even finished. Jordan's voice, usually controlled and confident, had developed a rasp overnight. By the second round, he was barely audible above a whisper. He pushed through, but the judges were leaning forward to hear him, and that never looked good. Then, in the 3rd round, their backup file opened corrupted. Error and the cloud login failed due to network outage. Their entire environmental modeling presentation, 3 months of data, the centerpiece of their final argument, was gone from the screen. The room went quiet in a way that felt like the floor had dropped out. Priya stared at the screen. Carter stared at Jordan. Jordan stared at nothing. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The head judge cleared his throat gently and said they had 5 minutes to continue or forfeit the round. That was when they remembered Marcus Webb, sitting at the far end of the team table, where he had been mostly ignored for the past 3 months. "Fine. Marcus, it is time to prove your worth," Jordan said. Jordan believed none of those words he just uttered, but he had no choice. Both Priya and Carter were blank. Marcus was his last resort. And what Marcus did next stunned everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to Untold Moral Tales, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Marcus walked to the front without rushing. He picked up the dry erase marker from the tray below the blank projector screen, uncapped it, and turned to the judges. "The simulation is gone," he said, "but the math isn't." And then he started writing. What came next was something that nobody in that auditorium had ever seen a 17-year-old do in real time, under pressure, in front of a room full of people. Marcus rebuilt the model's framework from memory, not approximately, precisely. He had been running the numbers quietly for months, in hallways, in empty labs, in the margins of borrowed notebooks. Yet he had memorized the data set not because he was told to, but because it was the most interesting thing he had encountered all year, and his mind simply held it. He derived the stress calculations by hand, step by step, walking the judges through each variable as he wrote it. He caught the redundancy they had never fixed, eliminated it cleanly, and showed how the corrected model actually strengthened their design. He explained the environmental simulation not as a graph on a screen, but as a logical proof, moving across the whiteboard in long, sure strokes. He spoke clearly. He had never spoken that clearly in front of a group before. Later, he wouldn't be able to explain where it came from. He just knew the material, and when you know something that deeply, the words tend to find their own way out. And everyone was surprised because Marcus never talked in class, never joined any club. He kept his top result to himself. The teachers knew he tested well, but scores from students like Marcus were celebrated quietly. Marcus had learned long ago that people rarely listened after hearing where he came from. The room was completely silent. A judge on the far left had stopped writing. She was just watching. Marcus finished, capped the marker, set it back in the tray, and returned to his seat. He looked down at the table. His hands were steady. The silence lasted several seconds longer than it should have. Then the head judge, a man named Dr. Ellison, who had overseen this competition for 11 years, leaned forward and said quietly to his colleagues, "Did he just do that from memory?" The second judge nodded once, slowly. Yet in the audience, someone began to clap, then two people, then the whole left side of the auditorium, starting low and building fast. Jordan Hale was sitting completely still. His mouth was open slightly. He had watched Marcus write out calculations that had taken their team weeks to compile, and he had done it in 9 minutes, by hand, correctly. Carter Mills was not smirking anymore. He looked like a person trying to remember something important that kept slipping away. Priya had her hand over her mouth. People in the audience were whispering. A few of the other teams were leaning together, talking fast. One student from a rival school turned to his teammate and said something that looked a lot like, "Who is that kid?" Dr. Ellison called a 5-minute recess. During that time, he walked over to the Hargrove table. He didn't talk to Jordan. He stopped in front of Marcus. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Webb, sir." "How long have you been working on this model?" "Since October, sir." The judge looked at him for a moment longer than felt casual. Then he nodded and walked away. Marcus looked at his notebook. His mother had packed him a sandwich that morning before her early shift. He thought about that for a moment, about her hands wrapping it in foil in the dark kitchen at 4:30 in the morning. He breathed once, slowly, and waited for the competition to resume. They won, not by a narrow margin, by a score that made the announcer pause before reading it aloud. Hargrove Academy had secured the regional finals. They would go to nationals. And later that spring, on a Tuesday afternoon in a university conference hall in Columbus, they won that too. The announcement came over a speaker system that filled the room with an echo. $5 million. A scholarship endowment in Hargrove's name. Full academic scholarships for every member of the winning team. For Marcus Webb, a boy who just 2 months earlier wasn't sure he could afford next semester's books. The team was hugging. Jordan grabbed Marcus's shoulder in a way that was more than a handshake and less than words. Cameras flashed. Someone from the university was asking for names. Marcus wasn't looking at any of it. He was looking at the back of the room. She was standing near the exit, still in her work uniform, the gray shirt with the building services logo on the chest, her lanyard still around her neck. She had come straight from a shift, hadn't had time to change. They had probably debated in the parking lot whether to come in dressed like that. She had come in. Diane Webb stood at the back of a room full of professors and competition officials and well-dressed families, and she was crying. Not loudly. Not the kind of crying that announces itself. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you have been holding something for a very long time and you finally, finally get to put it down. Marcus crossed the room. He didn't run. He walked the way she had always walked, steadily, without rushing, making every step count. When he reached her, he didn't say anything. He just put his arms around her, and she held on to him the way mothers hold children when they are not thinking about anything except that child. Someone nearby looked over and quickly looked away, because some moments are not meant to be witnessed too closely. Later, when the official photographs were done and the judges had shaken every hand, Jordan Hale found Marcus by the water fountain near the main doors. He stood there for a moment, the way people stand when they have something to say and aren't quite sure they deserve to say it. "I owe you an apology," Jordan said finally. "We all do. We treated you like you weren't really part of this. And that wasn't right." Marcus looked at him. He didn't look angry. He didn't look satisfied in the way that people sometimes do when an apology arrives. He just looked like himself, quiet and steady, the way he always had been. "You didn't know me," he said. "That's all?" Jordan nodded slowly. It like those 4 words had explained something he had been trying to understand for a while. Priya apologized too. More words, more emotion, the way Priya did everything. Carter said less, but he said it directly, which Marcus respected more. He didn't hold anything against any of them. He had grown up watching his mother smile at people who looked through her like she wasn't there. He had learned from her that grace wasn't weakness, that choosing not to be bitter was its own kind of quiet power. He was his mother's son, all the way through. There's something we do, without meaning to, that costs us more than we know. We look at a person and we see the surface, the clothes, the address, the name that doesn't ring any bells. We make a calculation, fast and silent, and we decide what someone is worth before they've had a single chance to show us. Marcus Webb wore a faded green hoodie and fell asleep in Friday classes and ate lunch alone, and nobody thought to ask why. He was mopping floors in the dark so that his mother wouldn't have to carry the cart alone. He was working through engineering models in pencil in empty hallways because that was the only light he had. He was building something in silence, the way people do when they have learned that nobody is watching, so you might as well build for yourself. The strongest people you will ever meet are often the ones who arrived without an introduction. They don't ask for your attention. They don't need your approval to keep going. They learned early that the work itself is the thing. All that character is what you are when the room is empty and nobody is keeping score. Marcus Webb helped win a $5 million scholarship endowment for his school. But what he really won was something that had always been his: the right to be seen, and the grace to let that be enough. Please subscribe to Untold Moral Tales, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent.